You're listening to Daventry Radio, connecting your community.
Hello, my name is Liam Howley, and for this podcast I'm going to be talking about street names. Yes, you probably don't think about it every day, and you're probably wondering why on earth you're going to be talking about street names. But don't switch off, please do bear with me, there is a reason for this. First of all, as many people will know, Daventry is split into a number of themes. There are admirals, poets, rivers, golf, and a few ex-councillors as well. This has left Daventry with many famous names. Just a couple, of course, are Shakespeare and Nelson, who are pretty famous, really. But a campaign started by local resident Lawrence Wheeler might just result in something a little bit different. Now, I'm sure Lawrence has nothing against Nelson or Shakespeare, but what Lawrence would like to see are more local people honoured with a street name. Local people, past and present, who have done great things for the town. I spoke to Lawrence to find out a bit more about this campaign and ask him how he got into it. He explained to me it all begun with a former editor of the Daventry Express, a man by the name of Walter Green, who not only had an impact on Lawrence's life, had a bit of a reputation.
Well, what it was is that when I was about 15, I did an apprenticeship at the Daventry Weekly Express in the High Street. My boss was a guy called Walter Green, and he had a very important part in my life. He was a brilliant guy. He was feared in the town. Anybody who knows Walter would know, his weekly article, Little Birds Are Whispering, was full of libel. But I mean, he was brilliant. He was the editor, the reporter. I can't speak too highly of the man. And he was just that I felt it would be nice for him to be remembered in Daventry, because I know he affected other people's lives as well. Probably not always good, but always about.
Lawrence explained that this libel once landed Walter in court. He was sued by a teacher who eventually was awarded one old penny. There was another story involving wrestler Giant Haystacks.
There's a little office at the back, and I used to work out the back there, and Mr. Green, he was a big man, he was over 20 stone and about 6'4", and his wife come scurrying back to me and said, "You better come at the office quick, there's some trouble." I walked in there and there was Mr. Green being pinned to the wall by Giant Haystacks, who was a professional wrestler who weighed in at 46 stone. Well, I was sort of 6 foot down those days, about 13 and a half stone. So there's three of us, and he had his hands around Mr. Green's throat, saying, "Come outside and fight me." Evidently what had happened was that Giant Haystacks, a couple of months previous, had been caught speeding from Braunston. He had been taken to court, and in those days the Daventry court was Tuesday morning, and Mr. Green had met him at the court and interviewing him and said to him, "Well, it's all fixed anyway," he'd said to this, "so your wrestling's all fixed." And to which Giant Haystacks followed him down to his office and was about to do him over, I think. Anyway, we managed to calm him down a bit, and he eventually left. And I remember Mr. Green turned to me and said, "I thought we handled that well." But Walter was just such a character. Everybody will have a story about Walter.
The list isn't just Walter. In fact, Lawrence went out onto Facebook, as we shall hear, and asked for other suggestions. He soon found there were more than he thought.
There are other people in Daventry who contribute a lot to Daventry in the past, and when they've died or when they pass on, it'll only be the families who remember them. So on Daventry Memories, the Facebook page, I asked for suggestions of anybody who felt there was somebody worthy of mention, and I had loads of inquiries. Madeline Punch, who's recently unfortunately passed away, her services to nursing in the town. Pete Spencer, he's another guy who's well known. He started the Helping Hands charity in 1980, which was a large concern, and he was also a photographer at the Daventry Weekly Express. Frank Hobbs, still alive, and his family have contributed nearly 200 years of service to Daventry Football Club. Henry Reynolds, Huell Hughes, Jeff Moore, Kenny Barton, another one who's local football development. There's ex-mayors, Jim Humphreys, and there's Mavis Matthews, Alf Goodrich, the Reverend Kenneth Ward, another one, Ted Sharp, and the Sharp family, three brothers, Ted, George and Roy, who contributed a lot to Daventry.
Lawrence has quite a formidable list, but how does he go about putting that list forward officially? I spoke to Councillor Alan Hills, who explained the process.
When there's new developments, the new street naming, in the first instance, the district council usually approaches the town council or the parish council if it's in a village. They're asked to put forward names that they would like it in the area. That's basically how it works. Names are checked to make sure that there's no duplication, obviously, in the area. The list of names then put forward to the developer for agreement, and once it's agreed on an agreed list between the town council and the developer, the list of names are then put on what is called public notice. This gives the opportunity for any resident who says, no, we don't want it, or they've got a problem, to object to the proposed names. If there are basically no objections, then the names and addresses are completed and distributed to all the statutory bodies involved. So that's basically the process that it goes through.
It would seem that developers play a pretty big role in this. Now, Councillor Hills did point out that individuals are free to make their street name suggestions, which is good news for Lawrence. Lawrence also pointed out that, as far as he was aware, developers have never actually turned down any suggestions, which would also be good news. This is something that could potentially spread to other towns in the county. From Lawrence's idea, people around the county have been saying, we should do something similar here. I will allow Lawrence to explain.
I did an interview with Northampton Radio one day, and when people do the news item, they generally have all important news things. Then at the end, they put something a little light, and they mentioned that about this guy in Daventry who's doing this, which I don't do, and they said they're going to name street names after. I said, and then what they did then, it happened every hour. It was on that people ringing in, Kettering rang in and said, why? Somebody said, well, why don't we do that? Why don't we name that? And Northampton, someone rang in and said, why not so and so? So it rather snowballed, and I like to think that perhaps, that other people will be honoured in their own areas like that.
There is some bad news, however. Well, bad news if you're alive. In fact, if you're alive, you're probably going to want to hope you're not on Lawrence's list. The reason for that is, to get a street named after you at least, you have to be dead. Councillor Hills explained the reason for this.
This is due to the fact that after a person is deceased, they can no longer disgrace the name. It makes that safe, and I think that's very important.
I also spoke to former Mayor Colin Davenport, who took a different view on this issue.
No, I think there are cases where you could name a street after a living person. If Daventry were ever to get an Olympian gold medal winner, then we might want to honour them straight away. Or if by any chance we produced an international footballer who won the World Cup, I'm sure that there's some reason for giving them some sort of commemoration within the town.
Colin was a little less keen on councillors having streets named after them. It seems, therefore, that if you're dead, that's great if you want a street named after you. That led me on to another question, which is perhaps a little bit off topic. Shakespeare and Nelson, who I mentioned earlier, have both been dead for a very long time. Shakespeare mentioned an innkeeper of Daventry. But what about Nelson? Why does Daventry, a town not known for being a seaside resort, have streets named after admirals? Colin gave us an answer.
It would appear that an Admiral Sir William Kennedy married a Daventry girl called Louisa Stopford, who lived on Falconer's Hill in the lodge there where the Stopford family lived. He married her in 1868, and after his naval career, he came back to Daventry to die in 1916. Presumably, when the names for the Southbrook estate were being thought about in the 1960s, someone latched onto the name Kennedy, and that was the core for having other admirals to have their names on the streets in the Southbrook.
While we may not be 100% sure on that, what can be agreed is that there are things to be positive about when it comes to Daventry.
I'm very keen that we recognise the efforts that people put in. I'm very proud of Daventry. We haven't got utopia, but I think the street names and that are important to bring memories back to people of those that done the work in the past.
It gets a lot of bad press, Daventry. I don't know why. A lot of people grumble about it, and I love Daventry. I mean, for me, business-wise, it was in the middle of the country, so everything was accessible. But also, my children have been educated in Daventry, and they've very happy with how it's worked out. My wife, we've been married now 52 years. Daventry's been brilliant to us, and I don't like to hear people run Daventry down because I think it's just been fantastic. But there's a lot of new people coming into the town, and hopefully they will get the feeling of Daventry. I don't like criticism, but I will always stand up for Daventry.
So there you have it. Perhaps in the future, given Lawrence's campaign, more of Daventry's roads will be named after people closer to home. People who I'm sure would never have thought their names would be up there alongside Shakespeare and Nelson, but people who have done their bit for Daventry. Given what we've heard, I'm sure that current Mayor Wendy Randall won't be hoping for a Randall Road anytime soon.